Commander Veltari of the Zoxkith Empire stood before a gathering of young officers in the dimly lit war room aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel hummed with the power of quantum engines as it drifted through the void. Between stars, her three arms bore the scars of countless battles, deep grooves where plasma burns had healed imperfectly, and her compound eyes held the weight of memories that haunted her sleep. The war room itself was a testament to Zoxkith military might. Holographic displays lined the walls, showing star charts of conquered systems, while tactical consoles blinked with data from 1,000 worlds under their empire's control. The assembled officers, their chitinous armor gleaming under the blue light, represented the finest military minds of their generation. "You think you know war?" she began, her voice carrying across the silent chamber like the rumble of distant thunder. The translator units embedded in each officer's armor converted her clicking speech into their native tongues. "You fought the Rilkins with their crystal weapons that could slice through our armor like soft flesh. You've crushed the Velmor. Rebellions faced their suicide bombers who turned their own bodies into living explosives. But you have never faced the humans." Lieutenant Kexmore shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his young face unmarked by battle scars. Fresh from the military academy on Zalprime, he had studied human tactical reports, but never seen real combat. "Commander, surely their primitive technology poses no real threat to our advanced fleets. Our intelligence reports show they still use chemical propulsion and kinetic projectiles. How can such crude weapons challenge plasma cannons that can melt through starship hulls?" Several other young officers nodded in agreement. They had grown up hearing stories of the Empire's glorious conquests, how superior Zoxkith technology had brought civilization to savage worlds across the galaxy. To them, humans were just another primitive species waiting to be enlightened by their rule. Veltari's mandibles clicked in what might have been bitter laughter, a sound like breaking glass that sent chills through the assembled officers. Exactly what we thought 20 cycles ago when we first encountered them in the Outer Rim territories. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel, using crude fusion drives that belched radiation and kinetic weapons that fired simple metal projectiles. Our xenobiologists called them the children playing with fire, too young and stupid to understand the forces they were unleashing. She activated the central holographic display with a gesture of her primary arm. The room filled with a three-dimensional image of a yellow star system, its planets orbiting in perfect mathematical precision. Earth, a single blue world orbiting an unremarkable G-type star in the backwater spiral arm of their galaxy. Population, 8 billion bipedal mammals living on the surface of a world covered mostly in water. The High Command looked at their crude cities, their polluted atmosphere, their constant wars among themselves, and decided they were a minor obstacle to our expansion into that sector. The younger officers leaned forward as the hologram zoomed in on the third planet, showing swirling white clouds over blue oceans and brown continents. Cities glowed like scattered jewels across the night side, connected by webs of light that marked their primitive transportation networks. Veltari continued, her scarred hands manipulating the display to show human spacecraft. "I was part of the first reconnaissance fleet sent to assess their military capabilities. 300 of our best ships, equipped with cloaking technology that made us invisible to their sensors. We spent months observing their defenses." Holograms shifted to show crude human vessels, angular metal constructs with fusion torches blazing from their rear sections. "We watched their military exercises, cataloged their weapons, small spacecraft no larger than our fighter craft, chemical rockets that could barely escape their planet's gravity well, nuclear weapons that seemed laughably primitive compared to our plasma cannons and quantum disruptors." Lieutenant Kexmore interrupted, his voice filled with youthful confidence. "If they were so primitive, how did they even detect our presence? Our cloaking technology is perfect." "They didn't detect us through technology," Veltari replied, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic light. "They detected us through something far more dangerous: intuition." Human intelligence officers noticed statistical anomalies in their shipping routes, unexplained equipment failures near our observation posts, subtle changes in their wildlife behavior where we had established monitoring stations. She paused, letting this sink in. While we were studying their military capabilities, they were studying us. Every probe we launched, every scanning beam we used, every coded transmission we sent back to Fleet Command, they were learning. From it all? So what went wrong? Asked another officer, a female named Curlin, whose family had served in the Empire's military for 12 generations. Valteri's expression darkened, the bioluminescent patterns on her carapace shifting to deep red. We made the fatal mistake of judging them by our own standards. We assumed they would follow the galactic warfare protocols that had governed civilized conflict for 10,000 years. That they would surrender when facing superior force. That they valued individual survival over collective goals. That they would negotiate terms when defeat became inevitable. She gestured, and the hologram changed to show a massive Zoxkith battle fleet. Hundreds of ships arranged in perfect formation. Our Grand Admiral Dekmer assembled the Fourth Conquest. Fleet 800 vessels carrying 200,000 of our finest warriors. The plan was simple. Demonstrate overwhelming superiority. Accept their surrender. Integrate their world into the Empire as a vassal state. The room fell silent as Valtaria's scarred hands trembled slightly. We were not prepared for what humans called total war. We had conquered 47 species across the galaxy, and each one had eventually submitted to superior force. The smart ones surrendered quickly to minimize casualties. The stubborn ones fought conventional battles until their defeat became obvious, then negotiated terms. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing the officers to lean forward to hear her words. But humans were different. We were not prepared for warriors who would rather die than yield a single inch of ground to an invader. We were not prepared for civilians who would take up arms alongside their military. We were not prepared for a species that saw surrender, not as a practical decision, but as a betrayal of everything they believed in. The hologram shifted to show the first battle coordinates, a small world on the edge of human space. It began at the mining colony on Kepler 4-4 to be a simple occupation. Mission, or so we thought. The colony had a population of 800 humans, miners, technicians, a few families. We expected token resistance, perhaps a few skirmishes with their security forces before their inevitable surrender. Altari's voice grew haunted as she continued. Instead, we encountered something that would haunt our species for generations. We met soldiers who fought like cornered predators, who turned every setback into a tactical advantage, who made every meter of ground cost us dearly in blood and time. She paused, her compound eyes reflecting memories of fire and death. The first human I ever saw in combat was called Deho, simple name for a being who would show us the true meaning of terror. He was not a soldier, just a mining engineer who happened to be on duty when our forces landed. But when the shooting started, this ordinary human picked up a weapon and became something that still visits me in my nightmares. The officers sat in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand that their comfortable assumptions about human weakness might be dangerously wrong. The assault on Kepler 4-4 should have been routine, Valtari continued, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic battle display that now filled the entire war room. The three-dimensional image showed a harsh, rocky world with thin atmosphere and brutal surface conditions. 3,000 Zoxkith warriors in full combat armor, supported by 50 assault craft and orbital fire support, against a human mining. A colony of 800 civilians and perhaps 50 security personnel. The display rotated slowly, showing the barren mining world in detail. Its surface was dotted with extraction facilities that looked like metal mushrooms sprouting from the red dirt, connected by sealed walkways to habitat domes that gleamed like silver bubbles under the alien sun. Massive excavation sites scarred. The landscape and towering processing plants belched steam into the thin atmosphere. Our intelligence was thorough, Valtari said, manipulating the hologram to show detailed schematics. We knew every building, every piece of equipment, every entrance and exit. The colony existed to mine rare earth elements needed for their primitive electronics. Most inhabitants were civilian contractors with families, not soldiers. Lieutenant Kexmore shifted in his seat, his young face eager for details. Surely such overwhelming odds guaranteed victory. 3,000 trained warriors against untrained miners. Veltari's mandibles clicked, a sound like breaking ice that echoed through the chamber. That's what every tactical computer predicted. Our assault began at local dawn, when human biological rhythms would be at their lowest point. 50 landing. Craft descended through the thin atmosphere like metal vultures, their heat shields glowing red as they cut through the sky. The holographic display shifted to show the Zaxkith assault force, massive beings in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Armed with weapons that could melt through steel, supported by floating combat drones that scanned for targets with electronic eyes. Our landing craft touched down in perfect formation around the colony perimeter. The plan was simple: establish a containment field, then advance in coordinated waves until all resistance collapsed. We expected to secure the entire facility within 6 hours and have the survivors processed for transportation to labor camps by nightfall. She paused, her scarred hands trembling as she recalled the memory. The first sign something was wrong came when our advanced scouts simply vanished. 20 of our best reconnaissance specialists, equipped with active camouflage and quantum sensors, sent into the mining tunnels to map human defensive positions. The room fell silent as Veltari continued, no distress signals. No weapons fired detected by our monitoring equipment. I'll spell 'em. They disappeared into those tunnels like they had never existed, swallowed by the darkness beneath the colony.
Ow.
She manipulated the display again. The hologram shifted to show the vast underground network beneath the mining facility. Tunnels, branched and twisted like the roots of some enormous tree, connecting mining shafts that dropped hundreds of meters into the planet's crust. Maintenance corridors, transport tubes, and ventilation systems created a three-dimensional maze that stretched 4 kilometers in every direction. The humans had been preparing for months, Veltari said, her voice growing darker. Spy satellites watched their surface activities. They were transforming the entire mining operation into something unprecedented, a fortress that extended deep into the planet's core. Every tunnel had been rigged with sensors. Every shaft turned into a potential ambush point. Every maintenance corridor equipped with automated defenses. Lieutenant Kexmore leaned forward. But how could civilian miners create such sophisticated defenses? Our intelligence showed no military engineers among the colonists. That was our first lesson about humans, Veltari replied. They don't separate their population into rigid castes like we do. A human who mines ore during the day might study military tactics at night. A woman who operates excavation equipment might also be an expert in explosives. They are a species of dangerous amateurs who refuse to stay in their assigned roles. The holographic display zoomed in on the main habitat dome, where Veltari's personal nightmare had begun. I was leading the second assault wave when we encountered their security chief, a human female named Biora. Our intelligence files said she was 43 years old. Had served in their military for 8 years before becoming a civilian contractor, and had 2 children living in the dome behind her. The image showed a lone figure standing at the main entrance, a small bipedal form, dwarfed by the massive airlock doors. She stood alone at the entrance to the main habitat dome, armed with nothing but a primitive kinetic rifle that fired metal projectiles using chemical propellants. Against our plasma weapons and powered armor, it should have been useless. The room was dead silent, as Veltari's voice took on a haunted quality that made several young officers shift uncomfortably. She didn't retreat when she saw our plasma weapons that could melt through tank armor. She didn't attempt to negotiate terms or ask for mercy for the civilians behind her. She didn't even take cover. Veltari's compound eyes seemed to stare into a distance none of the others could see. Instead, she smiled. A terrifying expression that showed her teeth like a predator bearing fangs, her eyes bright with something our xenopsychologists later identified as joy. She was happy to see us coming. The commander's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She said something in her language that our universal translators rendered as, "Come and take it," for simple words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. What happened next defied every principle of military logic we had learned in 10,000 years of conquest. As our assault troops advanced in perfect formation, expecting her to flee or surrender, the ground beneath us exploded. The holographic display erupted and simulated fire and smoke, showing the chaos that had followed. The humans had rigged their own mining charges throughout the entire area, industrial explosives designed to blast through solid rock, now turned against us. They were willing to destroy their own colony, their own homes, their own livelihood, rather than let us take it intact. The simulation showed Zoxkith warriors being thrown through the air by massive explosions, their advanced armor cracked and smoking. But that wasn't the worst part, Veltari continued, her voice growing quieter as if the memories were pulling her back into that nightmare. As our forces regrouped and tried to establish new positions, we found ourselves under attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The humans weren't just defending static positions like any rational species would do, they were hunting us. The display showed small groups of humans moving through the tunnel system like ghosts, appearing from hidden passages to strike at Zoxkith positions before vanishing back into the labyrinth. Small teams of 2 or 3 humans would emerge from ventilation shafts, maintenance tunnels, even sewage pipes. They would inflict casualties on our forces and disappear back into the maze before we could respond with overwhelming firepower. Veltari's voice grew even quieter, forcing the assembled officers to lean forward. This human called Deho led one such team. I watched through our combat camera feeds as he and 2 companions took on a full squad of our warriors, 12 trained soldiers in powered armor, supported by combat drones and heavy weapons. The holographic display recreated the battle, showing human figures moving with impossible speed and coordination through an industrial complex. They used the mining equipment as weapons in ways our tactical computers couldn't predict. Industrial plasma cutters became close-range assault weapons, or haulers weighing 50 tons became battering rams. Even the ventilation systems were turned against us. They flooded entire sections with toxic gases from the mining process. She paused, watching the simulated figures dance their deadly ballet through the holographic space. Deho himself was just a maintenance engineer, responsible for keeping the excavation robots running. But when the shooting started, he became something else, a warrior who understood every pipe, every cable, every weakness in the facility he had helped build. The battle lasted 18 hours, Veltari said, her voice barely audible now. 18 hours of constant fighting in tunnels and corridors where our superior numbers meant nothing, where our advanced weapons were useless against enemies who knew every hiding place, every shortcut, every trap. The holographic display showed the final moments explosions tearing through the facility as the humans triggered their ultimate trap, bringing down entire sections of the mining complex in a desperate attempt to take their enemies with them. When it ended, the colony was completely destroyed. The mining operation was ruined, the habitat domes breached, the processing plants reduced to twisted metal. We held nothing but a worthless piece of radioactive rock. But the cost. ... Veltari's voice cracked slightly. We lost over 800 warriors. Elite soldiers who had conquered a dozen worlds, reduced to corpses in the tunnels of a mining colony. Our assault craft were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Our support equipment was captured and turned against us. A young officer whispered in disbelief, and the humans... Every single defender died in that battle, Veltari replied. Men, women, even teenagers who should have been in school. They fought until their ammunition ran out, then fought with tools in their bare hands. When the facility's reactor went critical in the final explosion, the last thing our sensors detected was human voices singing their planetary anthem. The hologram faded, leaving the officers in stunned silence. But they made us pay such a price that our fleet commander called for massive reinforcements before attempting to attack another human colony. That should have been our warning that we were facing something unprecedented. Voltari's mandibles clicked ominously, the sound echoing through the silent chamber. Instead, the High Command decided the humans were simply more dangerous than our initial assessment suggested. They authorized the use of orbital bombardment for all future operations, believing that superior firepower could overcome human determination. Her compound eyes reflected the starlight streaming through the war room's viewports. They still didn't understand what we were truly facing, a species that becomes more dangerous the more desperate they become. 6 months after the nightmare, at Kepler, the High Command assembled the largest fleet in Zoxgith history, Veltari continued, her scarred hands gesturing to the new holographic display that materialized above the war table. The image showed a massive armada of warships, stretching across space like a metal constellation. 800 ships of the line, 50,000 of our finest warriors, supported by 200,000 automated combat drones. Our mission was deceptively simple: destroy the human military installations in their asteroid belt and prepare for the final assault on Earth. The display rotated to show the vast field of space rocks floating between the 4th and 5th planets of the human solar system. Thousands of asteroids tumbled slowly through the void, some no larger than buildings, others the size of small moons. Scattered among them like tiny jewels were human installations, mining platforms, refueling stations, and what appeared to be lightly armed defensive outposts. The asteroid belt, Veltari said, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic starfield, a region of space debris left over from their solar system's formation. Humans had been mining it for decades, extracting metals and rare elements to fuel their expansion into space. To us, it looked like a collection of sitting targets. She manipulated the display to zoom in on individual asteroids, showing the human structures clinging to their surfaces like metal parasites. Our intelligence indicated minimal human presence, perhaps 36 patrol craft, few armed mining vessels, and maybe 2,000 personnel scattered across hundreds of installations. Fleet Admiral Kurthax was so confident of victory that he publicly boasted, "We would sweep through their defenses in 3 days and be drinking victory wine in Earth orbit by the end of the week." Lieutenant Kexmore interrupted, his voice filled with the same youthful confidence that had once characterized their entire military. With such overwhelming numerical superiority, how could they possibly mount any effective resistance? 800 warships against 30 patrol boats. Veltari's compound eyes reflected the swirling asteroid field, but her expression suggested she was seeing something far more sinister than floating rocks, because we still thought like civilized beings following 10,000 years of established military doctrine. We expected them to fight conventional battles with clear battle lines, organized retreats, and surrender when defeat became inevitable. The humans had spent those 6 months after Kepler preparing something that had never been attempted in the history of galactic warfare. The holographic display shifted to show her personal memories of that day, recreated from the combat recordings of the battlecruiser Dark Talon, the massive Zoxgith warship, nearly 2 kilometers long and bristling with enough firepower to level a planet, moved through space at the head of a formation that stretched for thousands of kilometers. I was serving as tactical coordinator aboard the Dark Talon when we entered the outer edge of the asteroid field. At first, everything appeared exactly as our intelligence had predicted. Our long-range sensors detected the expected human installations, mining platforms, extracting or from asteroid surfaces, fuel depots storing hydrogen and oxygen for their primitive chemical rockets, communication arrays linking the scattered outposts. She paused, her scarred hands trembling as she manipulated the controls. Their patrol craft were maintaining standard defensive formations around the larger installations, just as any rational military force would do when facing impossible odds. I actually felt sorry for them, these brave but foolish humans preparing to die in a hopeless cause. The holographic display showed the Zoxgith fleet advancing in perfect formation through the asteroid field, their massive ships dwarfing the floating rocks around them. Plasma cannons tracked potential targets while shield generators hummed with power, ready to deflect any primitive human weapons. The engagement began exactly as our tactical computers had predicted, Veltari continued, her voice taking on the mechanical tone of an after-action report. Human patrol craft detected our approach at maximum sensor range and immediately began what appeared to be a standard fighting retreat. Their ships turned away from our advancing forces and fled deeper into the asteroid field, just as our military doctrine said they would when facing overwhelming superior numbers. Lieutenant Kexmore leaned forward eagerly. "So you pursued them to finish them off quickly?" "Of course," Veltari replied, but her tone suggested this had been a terrible mistake. Admiral Kurthax ordered the fleet to maintain pursuit formation and eliminate the fleeing human forces before they could escape to warn Earth. We followed them deeper into the asteroid field, our massive ships navigating carefully between the floating rocks while our fighters spread out to prevent any humans from slipping past our net. The holographic display showed the chase developing, Sketh ships moving steadily through the asteroid field, while smaller human craft darted between the rocks ahead of them like fish fleeing a school of sharks. "What we didn't realize, Veltari," said her voice dropping to an ominous whisper, "was that the humans had spent those 6 months since Kepler turning the entire asteroid belt into the most sophisticated death trap in military history. They had been modifying asteroids, installing hidden thruster systems that could move rocks the size of mountains. They had seeded the entire field with automated defense systems, what they called smart mines that could identify and track targets, and hunter-killer drones that looked exactly like chunks of space debris until they activated. The display suddenly erupted into chaos as the trap was sprung. Asteroids that had been drifting peacefully through space suddenly came alive, their hidden thruster systems igniting descent. Massive rocks hurtling toward the Zoxkith fleet like guided missiles weighing billions of tons. As we pursued their retreating forces deeper into the field, human named Hyenwu. We learned his name later from intercepted communications coordinated the most sophisticated ambush. In the history of space warfare, he had turned the asteroids themselves into weapons, using their mining equipment to hollow them out and install propulsion systems. The holographic recreation showed the moment when the Zoxkith fleet realized they were in mortal danger. Massive asteroids, some several kilometers across, began accelerating toward their ships with frightening speed and precision. Our plasma cannons were designed to fight other spacecraft, not moving mountains, Veltari explained, her voice tight with remembered terror. We could destroy small asteroids, vaporize rocks the size of buildings, but these were massive, some containing more mass than our largest battleships, and they were moving too fast for our big guns to track effectively. The display showed Zoxkith ships desperately trying to maneuver away from the incoming asteroid missiles while maintaining their battle formations. Some succeeded, they're powerful, engines allowing them to dodge the massive projectiles. Others were not so fortunate. While we were dealing with this unprecedented threat, trying to destroy or deflect asteroids the size of cities, the humans struck from every direction at once. Small fighter craft emerged from hollowed-out asteroids all around us, appearing so suddenly that our sensors registered them as new contacts materializing out of nothing. Veltari's voice grew more strained as she continued. These fighters were unlike anything in our tactical databases. The humans had somehow managed to compress fusion reactors into craft barely larger than our escape pods, giving them power-to-weight ratios that seemed to violate known physics. Each pilot was essentially flying a miniature star, and they used that incredible power to move and fight in ways we had never imagined possible. The holographic display showed human fighters dancing between the massive Zoxkith warships like angry wasps, their fusion drives leaving brilliant trails of superheated plasma as they dodged, returned fire, and struck at vulnerable points on the alien vessels. But what truly terrified us was their complete disregard for their own survival, Veltari whispered, her compound eyes reflecting the simulated explosions. When their weapons couldn't penetrate our armor, they used their ships themselves as weapons. When their fighters were damaged beyond repair, they turned them into guided missiles. She manipulated the display to focus on a single moment that clearly haunted her memories. I watched through our combat feeds as a human pilot named Minsu, his fighter critically damaged and life support failing, aimed his craft directly at the bridge of our flagship. Admiral Kurthax himself was standing there directing the battle. From his command throne, the simulation showed the small human craft trailing fire and debris. threading its way through a storm of defensive fire to impact directly against the massive alien warship's most vital section. The explosion, when his fusion reactor went critical, killed Admiral Kurthax and 300 of our best officers instantly. The flagship's bridge was completely vaporized, and the ship itself was crippled beyond repair. Veltari's voice cracked slightly as she continued, "But what terrified me most, what still haunts my dreams, was that we intercepted his final transmission before impact. This human, facing certain death, knowing he would never see his family again, was laughing. Not screaming in fear or crying for mercy, laughing with pure joy as he died." The room fell into stunned silence as the officers tried to process this incomprehensible behavior. In Zoxkith culture, death in battle was accepted as a duty, but no one found joy in their own destruction. The battle lasted for days and 3 nights, Veltari continued, her voice now barely above a whisper. For days of constant fighting in an environment where the very landscape was trying to kill us, human fighters emerged from hiding places we never suspected, launched attacks that defied every principle of space combat, and died in ways that turned their deaths into weapons against us. The holographic display showed the final tally: scattered debris fields where proud Zoxkith warships had once been, asteroids cracked and shattered by weapons fire, and the few surviving human installations still defiantly broadcasting their defiance across space. When it ended, we had lost 600 ships and over 30,000 warriors. 3/4 of the mightiest fleet in Zoxkith history, reduced to wreckage drifting among the asteroids. The humans lost most of their mining installations and nearly all their defending craft, but they had accomplished something that our military analysts said was mathematically impossible. She paused, letting the magnitude of the defeat sink in. They had defeated the greatest armada our empire had ever assembled using mining equipment. Civilian volunteers and what they call American ingenuity, their term for solving impossible problems through sheer stubborn creativity, the young officer asked hesitantly, his voice barely audible in the silent chamber. What did the High Command do then? Veltari's expression grew even darker, her bioluminescent patterns shifting too. Deep, angry red. They made a decision that would define the rest of the war and change both our species forever. They authorized the deployment of Omega-class planet-killer weapons devices, designed to crack worlds apart and render entire solar systems uninhabitable. The High Command decided that if humans would not surrender to superior conventional force, if they refused to follow the rational rules of civilized warfare, then their entire species would be exterminated down to the last child. Her compound eyes reflected the cold light of distant stars. That decision led to the final phase of the war, and to the moment when we learned the most terrifying truth about humans, that they become most dangerous not when they're winning, but when they have absolutely nothing left to lose. The siege of Earth began 3 months after the asteroid belt disaster, Veltari continued, her voice heavy with the weight of memories that had turned her compound eyes dim with exhaustion. The holographic display flickered and reformed, showing a beautiful blue-green world hanging in the void like a precious jewel. The High Command had stripped every sector of the Empire, pulling ships from garrison duties across 1,000 worlds, nearly 2,000 vessels of every class, dreadnoughts that could crack moons, carrier ships packed with fighter squadrons, support vessels carrying the most destructive weapons our civilization had ever created. The display rotated slowly, showing the massive alien armada arranged in perfect battle formations around Earth, ships stretched in every direction, their hulls glowing with the power of quantum reactors and plasma conduits. The smallest vessels were larger than human destroyers, while the flagship dreadnoughts dwarfed entire human space stations. I was assigned to the command vessel Eternal Conquest. Admiral Zektar's personal flagship, Veltari said, her scarred hands manipulating the holographic controls to zoom in on the massive central ship. It was a moving city home to 50,000 crew members and carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire continents. The Admiral had fought in 43 successful campaigns and never suffered a single defeat. She paused, her compound eyes reflecting the simulated starlight. Our orders seemed simple enough: establish a complete blockade around Earth, destroy all human military assets in orbit, then present them with terms for unconditional surrender. If they refused, we had authorization to deploy Omega-class planet killer weapons that would crack their world like an egg and boil away their oceans. Lieutenant Kexmore shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his young face troubled by the implications. Surely when facing such overwhelming odds, even the humans would finally see reason and surrender to save their people. Veltaria's mandibles clicked. In what might have been bitter laughter, a sound like grinding metal that sent chills through the assembled officers. Admiral Zektar believed the same thing. He was convinced that when humans saw 2,000 warships surrounding their homeworld, when they understood that further resistance meant the complete extinction of their species, their survival instincts would override their stubborn pride. The holographic display shifted to show communication arrays activating across the alien fleet, broadcasting surrender demands toward the blue planet below. The Admiral's message was clear and simple. Lay down your weapons. Submit to Imperial authority, and your species will be relocated to suitable worlds where you can live under our protection. Continue to resist, and Earth itself will be destroyed. Veltaria's voice grew quieter, more haunted. The human response came within hours, broadcast across all frequencies from their planetary capital. It was delivered by their supreme military commander, a female named Sa Young, who had lost 3 sons in the asteroid belt battle. She appeared on our screens wearing a simple uniform with no decorations, standing in what looked like an ordinary office rather than a grand command center. The simulation showed a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and tired eyes, but her voice carried absolute authority as she spoke to the camera. She looked directly into the transmission device as if she could see through it to every Zoxgith warrior watching. Then she spoke 7 words in her language that our universal translators rendered perfectly. Words that chilled every warrior who heard them. If you want Earth, come and take it. The room fell silent as Veltari continued. What followed was unlike any siege in the 10,000-year history of galactic warfare. We expected humans to retreat behind their planetary defense networks, to huddle in underground bunkers while we systematically destroyed their military infrastructure from orbit. Instead, they did something that defied every principle of rationale. Military strategy. The holographic display suddenly erupted with activity as thousands of human vessels began streaming out from Earth's orbital shipyards and lunar bases. They launched everything they had, every warship in their fleet, every fighter squadron, every armed patrol craft. But that wasn't the shocking part. Voltari manipulated the display to highlight the diverse collection of human vessels. Mixed. In with their military ships were cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining vessels, even small personal craft that normally carried families on vacation trips. They had spent the months since the asteroid battle converting their entire civilian space fleet into improvised warships. The simulation showed the incredible variety of human vessels, sleek military destroyers flying alongside converted cargo, ships bristling with missile launchers, luxury passenger liners that had been turned into troop transports, and tiny civilian craft that somehow carried nuclear weapons despite being designed for peaceful purposes. Leading this desperate armada was Admiral Taman aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Veltari said, her voice taking on a tone of grudging respect. Our intelligence had completely failed to detect what the humans had accomplished in those 3 months. It had turned their entire civilization into a weapons factory. She zoomed the display in on specific vessels, showing the ingenious modifications humans had made to civilian craft. Cargo haulers designed to transport food, and supplies had been converted into mobile missile platforms carrying hundreds of nuclear warheads. Passenger liners meant for comfortable interplanetary travel became carriers for small fighter craft. Even mining ships had been fitted with their industrial cutting lasers turned into crude but effective weapons. But what truly shocked us was the crews operating these converted vessels. Veltari continued, her compound eyes reflecting the chaos of the approaching battle. These weren't trained military personnel. They were ordinary civilians. Cargo pilots who had never fired a shot in anger, passenger liner captains who had spent their careers ensuring their guests had comfortable journeys, mining supervisors who knew how to extract or from asteroids. The holographic display showed the moment when the 2 fleets engaged, human vessels swarming toward the perfectly organized Zoxkith battle formations like angry insects attacking a predator. The battle that followed lasted 6 days and 6 nights of continuous fighting. The humans attacked with a desperation that defied every principle of military logic. Veltari's voice grew even quieter, forcing the officers to lean forward to hear her words. They would ram our ships when their crude weapons couldn't penetrate our armor. They would detonate their own fusion reactors to damage nearby vessels, turning their dying ships into massive bombs. They continued fighting even when their vessels were breaking apart around them, when their life support was failing, when any rational being would have surrendered to save their lives. The simulation showed the incredible carnage as human ships threw themselves against the alien fleet like waves against a seawall, each impact causing tremendous damage to both sides. I witnessed Admiral Taman's final moments through our combat surveillance feeds. His flagship was dying, atmosphere streaming from dozens of hull breaches. Fires raging through multiple decks, his crew dead or dying at their posts. She paused, her scarred hands trembling as she recalled the memory. But instead of surrendering or retreating, he manually piloted his burning ship directly toward our command vessel. As the Indomitable exploded in a fusion fireball that took both flagships with it, we detected his final transmission, not a cry of despair or a plea for mercy, but a simple message broadcast to every human vessel in the battle. Hold the line. The room was absolutely silent as Veltari continued, her voice now barely above a whisper. But what truly broke our will to fight wasn't their military resistance. It was what we discovered about human society during those 6 days of siege. Every communication we intercepted from the planet below showed their entire civilization, mobilizing for war in ways we had never imagined possible. The holographic display shifted to show intercepted human transmissions. Civilians volunteering for suicide missions to attack alien landing craft, families sending their teenage children to work 16-hour shifts in weapons factories, elderly humans who could barely walk learning to operate anti-aircraft defense systems. Their entire species had unified with a single, terrifying purpose, Veltari said, her compound eyes reflecting something that might have been awe. To make our victory so costly, so devastating to our forces, that we would never again dare threaten their world. They weren't fighting for territory or resources or political dominance. They were fighting for something far more dangerous, the right to exist as a free species. A young officer whispered in amazement, "How could such unity be possible? No species in galactic history has ever achieved complete planetary cooperation." "That's when we learned the most important lesson about humans," Veltari replied. "They are at their most dangerous when they have a common enemy that threatens everything they hold dear. Usual conflicts and divisions disappear completely when facing extinction." Her voice grew haunted again. On the 7th day, as Admiral Zektar prepared to deploy the planet-killer weapons and end the siege through complete genocide, something unprecedented happened. Our long-range sensors detected human ships emerging from behind their moon vessels, unlike anything we had seen before. The holographic display showed sleek, impossibly fast ships that seemed to bend space around them as they moved. These new vessels moved faster than our most advanced sensors could track. They carried weapons that could punch through our strongest defensive shields, as if they were made of paper. Leading this new fleet was a human called Junho, whose name would become legend among our people. In that moment, as we watched technology that surpassed our own being deployed by a species we had dismissed as primitive, we realized a terrible truth, Veltari said, her voice filled with something approaching terror. While we had been trying to break human resistance through brute force, they had been learning from every single battle, adapting and evolving their technology at a rate that seemed to violate the natural laws of scientific development. Final simulation showed the brief, devastating engagement as the new human ships tore through the Zoxkith fleet like paper. The final battle lasted only 3 hours. When it ended, half our remaining fleet was destroyed or crippled, and Admiral Zektar was forced to do something that had never happened in the history of our empire. Altaria's compound eyes reflected the weight of ultimate defeat. He contacted the human leadership to discuss surrender terms. The Zoxkith Empire, master of 1,000 worlds, and conqueror of 47 species, surrendered unconditionally to humans who had learned to travel between stars less than a century before. The armistice negotiations took place aboard a neutral station in the Vega system, Veltari continued, her compound eyes reflecting the weight of history that had changed the galaxy forever. The war room fell silent as she activated new holographic displays showing a massive space station floating in the void between stars. The station itself was ancient, built by a species that had vanished long before either humans or Zoxkith reached the stars. Its crystal corridors and gravity-defying architecture served as neutral ground where two civilizations could meet without either side claiming advantage. The display rotated to show the interior of the station, revealing chambers that seemed to bend space itself, where beings could walk on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. Crystalline walls pulsed with their own inner light, and the air itself shimmered with energy fields that translated thoughts and emotions between different species. I was part of the diplomatic escort, Veltari said, her scarred hands gesturing to show her position in the Zoxkith delegation. 24 of our finest warriors, still wearing our battle scars from the Earth siege, accompanying the Empire's greatest diplomats to face a species that had just defeated the mightiest fleet in our history. She paused, her voice taking on a tone of grudging respect mixed with lingering disbelief. The human delegation arrived in a single ship, not a massive diplomatic vessel like ours, but a converted cargo freighter that looked like it had been through a dozen battles. Its hull was patched with different metals. Its engines burned with the blue-white fire of fusion reactors pushed beyond their design limits. The holographic display showed the human ship docking with the ancient station, its crude but effective design a stark contrast to the elegant Zoxkith diplomatic cruiser that had arrived hours earlier. The human delegation was led by their Secretary of Defense, a female named Yunji who walked with a slight limp of someone who had fought on the front lines. Veltari continued, her compound eyes reflecting the memory of that first meeting. Our intelligence files said she had lost 3 sons in the war, one at Kepler, one in the asteroid belt, and the youngest during the siege of Earth. Yet when she entered the negotiation chamber, her face showed no hatred, no desire for revenge. She manipulated the display to show the interior of the negotiation chamber, a circular room where gravity worked differently in each section, allowing beings from various worlds to feel comfortable. Beside her sat Admiral Junho, the human who had developed the impossible technology that broke our final siege. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40 years in human terms, with prematurely gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything. Lieutenant Kexmore leaned forward, his young face eager for details. What were their surrender terms? Did they demand tribute? Territory? The execution of our war leaders? Veltari's mandibles clicked in what might have been amazement. That was what shocked us most. We had prepared for harsh demands, expected them to want revenge for the billions of their people we had threatened with extinction. Instead, they offered something that had never happened in the 10,000-year history of galactic politics, a true partnership between equals. The holographic display showed documents materializing in the air above the negotiating table, written in both human script and Zoxkith battle language. Secretary Yunji spoke first, her words carefully chosen, but carrying the absolute authority of someone who had earned the right to determine the fate of worlds. She said, "We did not fight this war to conquer or destroy your people. We fought to prove that humanity deserves its place among the stars as a free species. Now we offer you a choice: continued conflict that will eventually destroy both our civilizations, or cooperation that could benefit the entire galaxy." Veltari's voice grew quieter as she continued. Admiral Junho then did something unprecedented. In diplomatic history, instead of presenting his technological advances as spoils of war or tools of domination, he offered to share them freely. Faster-than-light communication systems that could connect worlds across the galaxy instantly. Medical techniques that could extend the lifespan of our species by centuries. Energy sources that could power entire star systems without depleting any natural resources. The display showed holographic blueprints and technical specifications floating above the table. each one representing scientific advances that would have taken the Zoxkith Empire decades to develop independently. But it was their chief negotiator, a male called Wu Jin, who delivered the masterstroke that made peace possible, Veltari said, her voice taking on a tone of professional admiration. This human had spent years studying our culture, our history, our psychology. He understood something that most species never grasped, that for the proud Zoxkith Empire to accept peace terms, we needed to find honor in our defeat rather than shame. She gestured, and the holographic display showed Wu Jin standing to address the Zoxkith delegation, his words being translated by the station's ancient systems into perfect battle language. He offered us joint exploration missions to map unknown regions of the galaxy, shared research projects that would combine human innovation with Zoxkith engineering excellence, cultural exchange programs where our warriors could train alongside human soldiers, learning their unconventional tactics, while teaching them our disciplined formations. The display showed images of proposed cooperative ventures, massive space stations built with both technologies, exploration fleets with mixed crews venturing into the unknown regions beyond the galactic rim, research facilities where scientists from both species worked side by side. Most importantly, Veltari continued, he showed us a future where our species' natural strengths, our discipline, our engineering skills, our organizational abilities, could combine with human creativity and adaptability to accomplish things neither civilization could achieve alone, the young officer asked hesitantly, and the High Command agreed to these terms immediately? Not at all, Veltari admitted, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to indicate complex emotions. There were powerful factions within the Empire that wanted to continue the war, generals who would rather see our last ship destroyed than admit defeat by a species they still considered primitive, politicians who believed surrender would end our dominance over the lesser species we had conquered. The holographic display shifted to show heated debates in the Zoxkith High Command chambers, where military leaders argued passionately for continuing the war, despite the terrible losses they had already suffered. But then the humans did something that changed everything and revealed the true depth of their character, Veltari said, her voice filled with something approaching. Without being asked, without any guarantee that peace negotiations would succeed, they released all Zoxkith prisoners of war. Not as part of any formal agreement, but simply as what they called a gesture of good faith. The display showed human transport ships arriving at Zoxkith space stations, their holds filled with thousands of alien warriors who had expected to die in human prison camps. Among the released prisoners was Admiral Zektar himself, the commander who had tried to destroy Earth with planet-killer weapons. Veltari continued. The humans could have executed him as a war criminal, held him as a bargaining chip, or simply let him die in captivity. Instead, they treated him with full military honors during his captivity and personally escorted him home. She paused, her compound eyes reflecting the memory of that moment. Zektar's report to the High Command was simple but devastating too. Those who wanted to continue fighting, he said, these beings fight like demons when threatened, but show mercy to defeated enemies who have tried to destroy their world. They are not like us, but perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs. A species strong enough to defend itself, but wise enough to offer friendship to former enemies. The holographic display showed Zoxkith prisoners returning home.
How many?
Of them bearing testimony about the unexpected kindness they had received from their human captors. Veltari stood, her three arms spreading wide as she addressed the young officers who had listened in stunned silence to her tale. It's a peace treaty. Was signed exactly 1 galactic year ago, in this very chamber where we now sit. Today, human technology protects our outer colony worlds from the pirate raids that once plagued our shipping lanes. Our warriors train alongside human soldiers in joint military exercises, learning their unconventional tactics while teaching them the value of disciplined formations. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed current scenes of cooperation, human doctors working in Zoxkith hospitals, using their advanced medical techniques to heal warriors injured in battles against common enemies. Zoxkith engineers helping to construct massive human space stations, The precision and attention to detail combining with human creativity to build structures that defied conventional physics. Their agricultural specialists have increased food production on our worlds by 300% using techniques that work with natural ecosystems instead of destroying them, Veltari continued. Our defensive technologies now protect human colony ships as they explore new star systems, ensuring that their families can travel safely to distant worlds. She paused, her compound eyes reflecting the star field visible through the war room's massive viewports. But never forget the most important lesson of this war. Humans appear soft and emotional to us. They value individual life over collective efficiency. They refuse to follow logical military protocols when their emotions are engaged. They make decisions based on feelings rather than pure tactical calculation. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the absolute authority of someone who had learned these truths through fire and blood. These apparent weaknesses are actually their greatest strengths. When threatened, they become more dangerous than any predator. Species in the galaxy. When challenged, they innovate and adapt faster than civilizations with twice their lifespan and 10 times their resources. When fighting for their survival and the future of their children, they will sacrifice everything to ensure their people's freedom. Lieutenant Kexmore spoke quietly, his voice filled with the humility that comes from understanding one's own limitations. What happens now, Commander? How do we proceed with this alliance? Veltaria's compound eyes reflected not just the starfield beyond the conference room, but the infinite possibilities that lay ahead for both species. Now we learn from them as they learn from us. The galaxy is vast and filled with threats that neither species could face alone. Ancient machines left behind by vanished civilizations, hostile species from beyond the galactic rim, cosmic phenomena that could destroy entire star systems. She gestured toward the viewports, where the running lights of a joint patrol could be seen disappearing into hyperspace. But together, combining their adaptability with our strength, their innovation with our discipline, their courage with our experience. Veltari paused, watching as more ships, both human and Zoxgith vessels, flying in perfect formation, prepared to jump to distant stars on missions of exploration and protection. Together, we might just survive whatever unknown dangers are waiting for us in the dark spaces between the stars. And perhaps, if we are very fortunate and very wise, we might even build something better than either species could create alone. A civilization worthy of the cosmos itself. The holographic display slowly faded, leaving the young officers in contemplative silence as they absorbed the profound lessons of humanity's first galactic war and the peace that followed. Remember this day and this story, Veltari concluded, her voice carrying the weight of absolute truth earned through terrible experience. Remember that the most dangerous enemy is never the one with the strongest weapons or the largest fleet. The most dangerous enemy is the one fighting for something they cannot afford to lose: their freedom, their families, their right to exist as equals among the stars. Her compound eyes swept across the assembled officers, each one now understanding that they were no longer conquerors but partners in a larger destiny. And if you ever find yourself facing humans in battle again, pray to whatever gods or ancestors you believe in that you are fighting beside them, not against them. Because a species that can turn mining equipment into weapons of war, that can unite an entire planet in desperate resistance, can show mercy to enemies who tried to exterminate them, such a species will always find a way to achieve the impossible. The end.